Reports, and do we have Mr. Meyer? Mr. City Engineer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great to be back in front of everyone tonight here. Looking forward to the conversation. So I wanted to introduce our new and improved capital improvement plan for 2019 to 2023. And as the city manager had spoke about earlier, we all put a lot of time into this. This is probably, I would say, 700 to 800 hours of staff time in total between not only myself, but for sure the other city departments. This is truly an effort by the team. And we had every department that supplies projects to our capital improvement planning process participate. I do want to call out a couple people. Jenna Vollmer in finance was instrumental in this and helping us to create these spreadsheets. They're very complicated. They link to a lot of things, so her expertise was very helpful. And of course, in my department, Alicia Erickson, who continues to do an excellent job for us in GIS. All of this data has to be brought together and then mapped and databases built. So she's been working behind the scenes to make this all possible. So wanted to thank them and then all of our city departments as well. So getting into this here, the city's been doing capital improvement planning since its inception. Every city does this. It's a normal process that we undertake to make sure that we're planning for the growth of the city appropriately. Throughout the years, and even in my time here at the city, the last 10 years, this is actually probably now our third iteration of what our capital improvement plans look like. Typically, it's a list of projects with associated costs that we compile and then we put in the budget. And it's very common to see a 5-year horizon in that. Some cities do 10, but 5 is kind of the industry standard. City leadership, you all, had expressed a desire for a new way of showing this information. You wanted to help us or to help the community adequately plan for infrastructure, but we were missing some data. So we put a team together to work on this, and what we have in front of you tonight is the fruits of those efforts. Traditionally, the engineering department, my department, has been the author of the capital improvement plan. We assemble all this information from the other city departments, and what we ask for is a list of projects with their start year, what the title is, of course, how it's going to be funded and what that cost is. We then assemble that document and we send it to the finance department for review, and then it's incorporated into the back of the city budget. It's been like that for many, many years, and I know you've all seen those. Based on the request for more detailed project descriptions and a more robust display of information, we had to develop a new process. There just wasn't enough there from some departments to be able to do what we wanted to do. However, that said, we didn't change or alter the internal departmental processes that, say, maybe the Public Works Department or my department would go through. And we didn't want to alter their decision making. They're the professionals that look at these projects. They know what they're doing. We just needed the information from them to be able to put this together. But we needed a standardized way of accounting for costs and displaying this information. In the past, you might have seen project estimates that would come in, and maybe only the city's cost share was shown in the capital improvement plan. Maybe it was a $10 million project, but we were only showing it valued at $2 million because that was our in. So now we have a consistent way of displaying that information across all projects. It wouldn't be an engineering presentation without a couple of flowcharts. That's kind of what we do. Eye rolls from all my constituents in the back. But basically what we start off with was, well, do we need a project? And if the answer is yes, then we need to start going through this process. So the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things is actually fairly similar. We did have to add a couple of things to get to where we are now. We developed this new CIP worksheet, which I'll get to in a minute. We wanted to get council's buy-in early in the process. So generally, you don't see the capital improvement plan until September at budget time. Now you're seeing it now. And so the thought there was, if we can get buy-in up front, that'll help us inform our budget process, and then the modeling begins from the finance department. You'll now see a standalone document. So that 154 pages that we put together, that's the CIP. It's not going to be in the budget anymore. There might be portions of it that go in the document, but the CIP will now be standalone. And of course, our GIS database will be created and maps will be put on. We wanted to have that done for tonight, but there just wasn't enough time. So over the next few weeks, we'll be taking this data and building that website, and then eventually we'll make that open to the public. When you know it, it's another flow chart. So basically, I wanted to go through how we put these projects together. And like I mentioned before, we didn't ask the departments to change the way they're doing things. This is how we put projects together. It's just in a different format now. So when we look at scoping projects, first we take a look at what's the best available data. Do we have any reports available to us, studies that we've done? And we use that information, if it's available, to start scoping a project. And then from that, we can develop costs. Most of, if you've looked at some of the data that we put in the CIP, you'll see that the lion's share of project costs, or revenues, excuse me, in our CIP are from state or federal agencies. And so getting their buy-in and programming those projects with them is absolutely critical. And so we usually have some sort of agreement or programming component of these projects with them, and then that helps to inform not only the project costs, but then what's the timeline, because we have to fit with that agency on when they can deliver those funds. All of that information is then combined into the CIP spreadsheet, and that helps to compile these costs. Then the departments will now rank projects. We haven't done that before. I guess in this format, I mean, really, the ranking before was, well, this project has to go in a certain year because of its need and desire for the community. So we still do that, but now there's a number behind it. Finally, we send that off to the finance department for their review, and then the spreadsheets are compiled. So this is the blank template. This is the summary sheet, and if you look through the appendices in the CIP document, you'll see all these filled out for each individual project. Basically, what this front-end sheet does is it summarizes all of the input data that I just talked through into this front end. It shows the 5-year expenditures, such as capital outlay, personnel and operational costs. It describes what the revenue sources may be for this project. There's a section for project scoring that's based on the priorities and the information that the departments put together, which we'll get to in a minute. And then finally, we put a project map on there so people that are looking at this project know where it's located within the city. We also have a questionnaire that we've developed, and the purpose of this is to try to get more information about the project. So instead of just seeing a table with a project name and a dollar figure next to it, now we get some more information about what is the project and why is it important and how it's going to be funded. We want to talk about how this project might compare to other projects within the department and why it's ranked higher or lower. And then we also want to talk about operation and maintenance. What are some of those concerns with this project, and then any other information that might be important. So this is the workhorse part of this spreadsheet document. This part isn't in the appendices for the project, but this is where all the inputs go. And so this is where we talk through all the revenues within that 5-year period that are going to be put in that project, all the capital outlays. We get pretty detailed on some of these breakdowns. Not all projects are going to have that level of detail at this point, but if we have it, we want to show it. If there's a project such as a fire station that might take personnel costs, we want to account for that here. We can put lump sum wages in there, and then there's some multipliers in there that give us an idea of what the benefits may be, so we can account for some of those things. And then ongoing operational costs, at this point on a project, they're more higher level. We don't go into, is it power or gas? It's just classified as utilities. So I wanted to give an example here of what this looks like and how it's developed. So this is our 31st Avenue reconstruction project. You can see here on the back end when we input all these dollar amounts, we have all the revenues that come into the project that are shown in that 5-year period, all the capital outlays, and then we take a best guess at what some of the utility bills might be for powering streetlights. All that information is then transferred back to that summary sheet, and it's displayed in this manner so that you can get the 5-year cost information. We then put the scoring criteria in there that the departments have all come up with, and we get to the final score at the end, and then of course we create that GIS map. So speaking of scoring, just a little insight on how my department would score a project. So we have the same scoring criteria that we use for every single project. And so we don't want to develop a criteria that then allows us to cherry pick a project or make an arbitrary decision based on what we think is good or not. So you will see this same criteria used for the 31st Avenue project, that was used for the City Hall retaining wall, that's used for ADA upgrades on Burdick Expressway. And that's how we as professionals analyze these projects. So as an example, like I alluded to earlier, my department especially, dealing on the street side, lives and dies by federal or state funding from FHWA. So if my project qualifies for that funding, we're going to get 10 points automatically. If that funding is programmed within the current year, which 31st Avenue is, it's going to get another 10 points. If it's 5 years out into the future, it's only going to get 2. And the theory there is the farther the project out, the funding may not be known or locked down yet, so it should have a lower priority as a project that is imminent. It's ready for construction. When we talk about the need to replace critical infrastructure, some of the things that are important to us is the infrastructure past its typical design life? Does the project have a large population that it serves? On our project here, the pavement is in satisfactory to poor condition, depending on where you're at in the corridor. Again, we used our best available data, the pavement study that we had not too long ago to help us make some of these decisions. The water and sewer on the corridors in good to poor condition, depending on where you're at. Some of it's brand new, some of it's 40-some years old. And of course, storm sewer is in poor condition, so we scored this out at a 17. Safety improvements. Will we have an increase to public safety, or is there an issue with public safety that we need to address on this project? Yeah, there is. It's riddled with potholes. It has poor lighting. There's frequent flooding, and all these considerations would then lead to a higher point score. Classifications of roadways. Obviously, you want to invest more dollars into higher classes of roadways that carry more traffic, and we reflected this in this category. 31st Avenue is a minor arterial. It scores 15 points. How feasible is the project? Is it easy to permit? Do we need a consultant right away? Those sort of things. It's fairly straightforward in design and permitting. We do need some right away for the project, and a consultant was required, so it didn't get all 10 points, but it got quite a few. And can we program this project with others to help? Can it be phased? Can we save dollars by pairing projects together? And on this one, yes, we can. We can replace some of those old water mains and valves while we're there and we have the street tore up. And we can phase this project to provide access to residents. So when you total up all the points, it scores an 89. And of course, we answered the questions that we had for the project to help describe what it is and where the dollars are coming from. And finally, what are some advantages of this new process that we've gone down? So each of the department now uses the exact same process for each and every single project that's put in the CIP. So you always know that a project's getting evaluated the same way. The same inputs are going in. We're accounting for costs the same way. So there's additional consistent information. Then each department's projects are assembled into a single spreadsheet so that we can compare them side by side and then use the scores that the department heads scored their projects on and then put those in a rank 1 through X. We build a summary spreadsheet, and that's what's shown here on the screen. We can take all of the data and costs from all the other departments and assemble them into a series of tables so that you can do data analytics on it and do a side-by-side comparison on where the dollars are coming from. You know, what are the dollars per year by department, et cetera. So by combining all this information into one document like this that's consistent, we think we have some pretty good advantages here. So what I wanted to do tonight, Mr. Mayor and Council, was just give you an introduction on how we did this. So as you're looking at the document, I'm hoping that what you take away from this presentation tonight is there's a lot of thought and time that went into this, and if you have any specific questions on projects, we can answer those now or in the future or whenever. And then next month, I'd like to come back and we can either do another presentation or just put it on the agenda again for approval or editing. So with that, Mayor, I'd be open to any questions you may have.
Mr. Meyer, thank you so much. Intro to CIP 101. Any questions for any questions for Lance? Alderman Padragula.
More of a comment. I've been looking at these things. My first one was in 1998. This is many orders of magnitude improved from what we had, and I just can't say enough good about this. Data-based, it allows opinions to come in. I particularly like the fact that each department has its own kind of way of looking at things, but there's a common framework. This is outstanding. I mean, I can't say enough good about it. I'm a fan of numbers, obviously, but at some point, you know, at our level, it's going to be more than numbers. It's going to be politics in the best sense of the word, looking for the well-being of the polis, the community. And I think we have to keep that in mind. We have to have that subjectivity, whether to some extent it's at a department level and it's factored in, or at our level. So this is about as comfortable as as far as I would go in terms of the numbers, because at some point it does have to come, you know, to our common sense of what's good for the community. And I think there's a open recognition of that. So I'm not sure I've ever seen anything better produced by city staff, you know, since 1998. I'm just really overwhelmed. This is fantastic. This is wonderful. It's a good start for us. And people who want us to be more accountable, I mean, this is where it starts. So you know, particularly with the rationale, instead of just being presented with a list of things, a rationale of why this is important and how it's important, and then how it fits into the broader scheme. So like I say, I just can't say enough good about this. Thank you.
Be honest, it was the flow charts that put you over the edge.
Lance.
Brings back memories of analytical chemistry. No, really.
Mr. Mayor, is it still Engineers Recognition Week or something?
Keep it going.
We missed it by 1
Do a
week,
month. Why
Alderman
not?
Janser. Alderman Straight, did you have a question from earlier?
Mr. Mayor, thanks. Lance, how far out are we given advance notice from like DOT of what's on horizon for state funds coming down the pike for 1, 3, 5-year projects? I've always been curious for myself and the general public, because you know, the criticism that we hear is, you guys knew this was coming. Why couldn't you educate people on the flow of traffic in town? And so can you explain that a little bit to me?
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Mayor and Alderman Straight. The DOT uses what they call a 5-year STIP. I'll mess up the letters, so we'll just call it STIP. But basically, that's the programming document that we work with them on. So they will solicit projects from us, the city, for a particular period of years. So I believe last year was for the year 2023. And so typically what we'll do, we'll get a breakdown from the DOT as far as how much or how many dollars we have in our account. We have an urban roads account. You've heard me reference that program in the past. And so typically the city gets about $2 million a year in that program. When we fund 31st Avenue here in 2020, that project will actually go in the hole a little bit. DOT will advance fund us, and then as the year goes on, we'll build that account back up. So by about 2023 or 24, we should have enough dollars in that account again to start looking at a project. So between now and then, what we do as staff is we look at, okay, where are the growth areas within the city that we've identified? Where are some of the major traffic generators coming from? Do we have any corridors that need some capacity or reconstructions? Like right now, we're looking at 3rd Street pretty hard because the condition of the pavement, the utilities, and there is an opportunity there for some grant funds that we can apply for. So over the next year or so, we'll be analyzing that to see what kind of project we want to push forward. If we have a good project there, we can request funding through the DOT. And of course, that always comes through you first. We ask that we go and approve these projects to be submitted, and then if the DOT puts us in the program, if it fits within all the other cities that apply for it, like Fargo and Bismarck, we have to get in line and wait for those funds, and then we program that project forward.
Thanks, Lance.
Alderman Wolski.
Mayor Sitma, thanks. Lance, to echo all of Alderman Papagula's comments, absolutely. Please thank your staff, everybody who is attached to this work. This is, I think, just a pretty monumental step forward in terms of the planning and the transparency and the understanding of how all this stuff gets done and how it ends up in front of us and all of these pieces. To speak a little bit to Alderman Papagula's point in terms of when this kind of steps off the sheet from the numbers and becomes the more intangible discussions about how we prioritize these things. I wanted to at least offer an idea that perhaps should be considered in the scoring, which is sort of, and maybe it was there and maybe I just missed it too, but sort of the adherence or the fit within the larger comprehensive plan. And right now that isn't perfectly clear because we as a council and with the city manager haven't quite taken up the values and the vision and the principles and those types of things. But I see a place once we get that work done for that also to sort of fit into these scoring documents and how well they adhere to that. And so I think, again, back to always improving, I think, maybe there's a way to do that in the future in terms of trying to capture some of those intangible qualities. In terms of the actual plan and the draft that was before us, one, thank you for putting First Avenue North on there. That's a project that I think people in town have sort of thrown their hands up at for maybe decades and decades. At least it's on the spreadsheet now, right? So that's a huge step. There were a couple that I'm not sure if I missed them. Maybe they were there, but the Ann Street Bridge. Obviously, that's something we're studying at the very least in terms of getting a sense of. I don't know if that belongs on one of these sheets or not. And then also the quiet zones downtown. I know we're sort of seem to be taking that on piecemeal and some of these other opportunities that have come up, but just a couple things that jumped out right at me to see if we can get them programmed somewhere, at least in the mix.
Certainly. And Mr. Meyer and Alderman Wolski, to your very first point about the comprehensive plan, it is there, maybe not as bold as you would like, but for instance, in the public works sections, when they evaluate utility installations, they have some criteria in there about does this fit within the comprehensive plan as far as where the city is going to expand next. But we do that as well on a transportation level, but we have to also balance that with what we have. Like for instance, we know that within the next 6 or 7 years, South Broadway, for where we left off, about 19th Avenue all the way south, has to be reconstructed and 6-laned. It's not in the program yet because we haven't identified where we're going to find all those dollars yet. So we look at it not only on new growth areas in the comp plan, but then also what we have to take care of internal.
Further questions for our city engineer? Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. That takes us to number 16, miscellaneous and discussion.